Hello all, my name is Veronica Torres-cortijo and I will be presenting on the United States food policy. So the United States food system is regulated by two different departments. So we have the FDA and the USDA. So this PowerPoint was prepared for my introduction to regulatory affairs of food class. So I hope you guys enjoy and learn a little bit more. So in this presentation, I will focus on three topics. So this will be the history of the USDA and the history of the FDA and the authorities that both agencies have and some challenges that they may be facing. I will first start off with a general overview and some acts that I thought really important in the history of the USDA. So first, the USDA was established by President Abraham Lincoln in 1862. So President Abraham Lincoln was very involved in agriculture and really cared for farmers. So under his time, the department was called the People's Department. Also in 1862 and 1890, the Morrill Land Grant College Act was funded, and this set aside federal land to give to states in order to learn and benefit from agricultural and mechanical arts. And each state was donated some land. In 1887, the Hatch Act was founded. This act helped universities research issues of agriculture. So this was the quality of the soil, quality of water, what health risks or benefits agriculture practices had on individuals. In 1889, President Cleveland signed a legislation which promoted the Department of Agriculture to the cabinet level. In 1914, the Smith-Lever Act was established, so this helped connect universities, land, and grants to farmers, so farmers will get an education as they were working in farms. In 1994, the Department of Agriculture reorganized, so both the Land Grant Act and the Hatch Act and the Smith-Lever Act were combined, and everything was under the same agency. So it was to make it easier to allocate funds and provide leadership and research and education in the U.S. Department of Agriculture. In this slide, we will focus on the history of food safety. So the first Food Safety Act or law that was passed, regulation, was in 1906, and this was the Federal Meat Inspection Act. This was established after the book exposure of The Jungle by Upton Sinclair came out, which exposed the meat companies as unsanitary, dirty, and inhumane. Another Food Safety Act that was passed by the USDA was in 1957, which was the Meat and Poultry Inspection Act, which required the same regulations as the Federal Meat Inspection Act, but before this act, it was only applied to meat, so this time it was applied to poultry. In 1959, the Humane Method of Slaughter Act was passed, and this was due to concerns from the public of the ways that meat and poultry animals were being killed. In 1970, the Egg Product Inspection Act was passed, so this act was mandatory to do continuous egg inspections in plants that produce liquid, frozen, or dried egg products. In 1994, the USDA declared E. coli 015787 as an adulterant. So this was to prevent foodborne pathogens or foodborne illness outbreaks. So this was actually established after the Jack in the Box outbreak of E. coli. And along with this act, meat companies had to establish a hazard analysis critical control point plan, which helped identify any hazards that could potentially harm the public. FDA was first established in the 1920s, and the first act was established for standardization of drugs. In 1848, there was an act that did not allow adulterants in drugs, and this was the Drug Importation Act. The first food act that I saw was the Tea Importation Act, and this was in 1897, and this act restricted the importation of tea that might have been tinted with high levels of fluoride, heavy metals, and pesticides into the U.S. In 1998, the Committee on Food Standards was established, so this began to incorporate standards into their food statutes. In 1902, Biology's Control Act was established, and this was created to ensure safety and purity of drugs. In 1906, the FDA started regulations of food due to the Pure Food and Drug Act. In 1999, U.S. versus Johnson, which was a court rule that the 1906 Food and Drug Act does not prohibit false therapeutic claims, but only false misleading statements about the ingredients or identity of drug and food. So I will move over to some food safety acts that I thought were important. So the first certified color regulation was established in 1907, which requested manufacturers and users to list 7 colors found suitable for the use in food. In 1938, the Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act was instituted to provide standardization of food and prohibited the false claim, misleading containers, and proper labeling. The FDA would also have to audit facilities to ensure that food safety. During this time, the FDA and the USDA were still one department, but in 1940, the FDA transferred from the Department of Agriculture to the Federal Security Agency. In 1949, Miller's Amendment affirms that the Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act must be applied to goods that were regulated by agencies that have been transported from one state to another and have reached consumers. In 1966, the Fair Packaging and Label Act was established, and this was to make manufacturers label all ingredients used in the descending order by the volume and weight of the ingredients. In 1958, the Food Additive Amendment was established. In this products that had additives must be allowed by the USDA or FDA, so it had to be a list of approved additives under the GRAS Act. So in 1990, the Nutrition and Labeling Education Act was mandatory, so all FDA products had to have a mandatory nutrition labeling on their packaging. In 1996, the Food Quality Protection Act was established, and it was established to have a healthy base standard used for pesticides. So there had to be a risk assessment in order to use a pesticide in food. In 1997, the Food and Drug Administration Modernization Act was created, and this helped to establish food safety. So in 2011, the Food Safety Modernization Act was established, and this made the FDA focus on preventative measures instead of reacting to food safety problems. So now I will jump over to authority. So the USDA oversees meat, poultry, egg products. And it's mainly processed egg. They oversees any processed meat, any food product that contains 3% of raw meat or greater than 2% of cooked meat. They also oversee catfish, meat grading, vegetable grading, fruit grading, organic food products, and the Farm Bill, which includes a lot of the nutrition and food assistance programs. Some of the historical changes that I thought were important was the relation of eggs. Prior to the Egg Product Inspection Act, there was only grading of eggs, and this was done by the size, shape, and weight of eggs. Although the USDA deemed it to be a high-risk food product due to salmonella. Another historical change was the Jack-in-the-Box outbreak, which was grounds for HACCP plans. So here are some of the subdivisions of the USDA that I thought were important. So we have the Agriculture Marketing Service. This has a lot of action on fair trade. There was the Agriculture Research Services, which help research better farming techniques. We have the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services, and this actually ensures the health of animals and plants and imported goods. We have the Center of Nutrition Policy and Promotion, which helps establish dietary guidelines. We have the Food and Nutrition Services, which help improve food security and reduce hunger. We have the Food Safety and Inspection Services, which ensure that the general public is receiving safe quality food. We have the the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, which helps with agricultural research and education. The FDA has regulatory authority over seafood, which does not include catfish, fruit, vegetables, egg and shell, animal feed, sausage casings, bottled water, and imported goods. Historical changes would be grass. So prior to grass, which is general recognized as safe substances, manufacturers could use any substance that they wanted in food without a risk-based analysis. GMPs also help with adulteration of food. HACCP also help to prevent harm to the consumers and help with identifying any potential issues. Although before FSMA, FDA did not require all food products to have a HACCP, but now it is mandatory that foods registered under FDA have to have a HACCP plan. So some challenges that the USDA faces is climate change. So climate change really affects the way farming is being done, and it affects farmers in the sense that they can lose their crops. Food insecurity is also another challenge. So food security has been a challenge for over a decade now, and it seems that we just can't figure it out. One of the biggest challenges I feel was during my research was, even though catfish is a low risk food, the USDA believes is a high risk product due to excess chemicals found in the water where catfish are harvested. But many believe that this program is a waste of cost to the government. So a quote that I found very interesting is, deciding to treat catfish and only catfish like beef or chicken throws a wrench in the system. Meanwhile, catfish inspections have gained a lot of enemies on both sides of the aisle. So I feel like it's something that they don't necessarily need to regulate. It should just be left to the FDA. A challenge that I thought the FDA, or thought interesting that the FDA faces, is the lack of resources in a lot of their departments. So one of them I thought that was very interesting is the lack of resources in the food safety department, which doesn't always allow for FDA to have auditors. So it makes it really challenging for the FDA to do yearly visits. So they categorize high risk manufacturing plants to visit instead of a lot. So I feel like a way this could be prevented is maybe if the USDA and FDA went back into one department, since the USDA constantly has auditors on a daily basis, and the FDA doesn't have any auditors on a daily basis, and the FDA tends to hire people that are a bit not educated in a lot of the food regulations, so they can hire people from the health department or just local agencies.